Good day everyone. Today we'll discuss 5 reasons to love and hate the Opel Frontera. This Opel SUV is undoubtedly one of the most controversial models on the market. On the one hand, it's been criticized in countless ways, yet on the other, it was undoubtedly, at one point, one of the most popular SUVs in our country. So why was it criticized, and why, despite everything, did the Frontera enjoy such popularity? The history of the Opel Frontera begins in 1988, when the management of Isuzu, then part of the GM Constellation, introduced a pair of SUVs with a practically passenger car body, based on a mid-size pickup truck, to the domestic market. The following year, these vehicles debuted in the US market under the names Amigo and Rodeo and immediately gained considerable popularity. It was these models that GM management chose as one of the tools for expansion into European markets. By that time, not many SUVs were being produced in the old world. Mercedes-Benz G-Classes and Range Rovers were expensive. Vass and his Niva were sadly missing out on their chance at success due to an underdeveloped dealer network and poor product promotion. And the few military SUVs were largely ignored. SUV fashion hadn't yet taken off in the late 1980s, but GM rightly believed that the S-Class was unlikely to escape the tide of the old world. Since Opel was GM's primary European presence, a perfectly rational decision was made: transfer all the documentation to the company and, to avoid irritating Europeans with large-capacity engines, replace them with small displacement Opel engines, making sure to include fuel-efficient diesels in the lineup. The premiere of this new-to-Europe midsize SUV with a rigidly engaged front axle and a low-range transmission, dubbed the Frontera, took place at the Geneva Motor Show in the spring of 1991. In February 1992, GM's new plant opened in Luton, England. GM management was right. Just a year after the start of serial production, the Frontera topped the sales charts in its class, with 37,500 units sold. As for our country, which had enthusiastically plunged into the abyss of capitalist construction, the lads with their muscular necks were initially overjoyed at the opportunity to buy a specific German SUV for a fraction of the price. But they quickly realized that the Frontera was completely unsuitable for active driving due to its lack of power. Thus, the car's primary audience became members of the middle class, burdened with families, a love of outdoor recreation, and a dacha hundreds of kilometers from the city. And, inevitably, young but ambitious guys who didn't have the money for a wide, lean, or a Land Cruiser. But they still wanted to drive an SUV. Meanwhile, the car gradually evolved and improved. The Frontera began its production life with rather sad 8-valve, sparse gasoline 4-cylinder engines under the hood, as well as a 4-cylinder turbo diesel. In 1995, the first restyling took place. The leaf spring rear axle suspension was replaced by a coil-over-lever system, which improved handling and ride smoothness. The dashboard was redesigned. The rear drum brakes were replaced with disc brakes. Finally, new engines were added to the lineup. 16-valve engines from the Equote K family, the 2.5-liter X22XE with 141 horsepower and the 136 horsepower 2-liter X20XE, as well as the excellent 2.5-liter Yiwu turbodiesel with 141 horsepower. However, in 1996, it was replaced by the Italian-made 2.5-liter BM1B with 115 horsepower. In 1995, the second generation of the Frontera B SUV began production in Luton. The new vehicle was larger and more impressive. Every body panel was redesigned. The rear door opening system was also changed. The lower half now folded sideways, eliminating the need for a special bracket and allowing the spare tire to be mounted directly on the door. The inertial automatic front-wheel freewheel clutches were replaced by a vacuum-activated all-wheel drive system, allowing the front axle to be engaged at speeds up to 100 km/h. Of the previous engine range, only the improved ecoic engines remained. Two new engines were added, a 2.2-liter diesel with direct fuel injection and a 24-valve Isuzu 6VD1 V6 producing 205 horsepower. Versions with an automatic transmission were added to the model lineup. This vehicle remained in production until December 2003, when the model finally migrated to the used market. Today, despite the passage of time, used Fronteras of both generations are quite affordable. But to understand whether buying a classic body-on-frame SUV makes sense, it's worth reading online reviews and seeing what owners love and hate about the Opel Frontera. As with many SUVs descended from pickup trucks, the Opel Frontera driver doesn't sit like a bus, but rather almost like a car, with their legs stretched out in front. Some people find this quite acceptable, claiming it makes transferring from a car easier. It's also more comfortable on long trips, but many owners complain that the seat is practically impossible to adjust. The only solution is to install spacers under it and raise it higher. Otherwise, the hood obstructs forward visibility. This limitation begins to show up not on the highway or in the city, but off-road, where it's crucial to see what's happening directly under the bumper and beneath the wheels. Furthermore, the B-pillars cut off half of your side visibility. This is especially annoying when maneuvering in tight city parking lots. The last Opel Frontera rolled off the assembly line in 2004, but the car remains quite popular on the used car market, and even examples over 20 years old are in demand. And it's not because of any particular reliability. Anyone who mentions Opel's legendary reliability will be met with bewilderment and perhaps even a twitch of the wrist. But many reviews confirm that the car is robust, durable, and very easy to repair. It's as simple as a bicycle. You can fix everything yourself in your garage. I rebuilt the suspension myself and replaced the air conditioning compressor myself. Many parts from domestic cars can often be used for repairs. A diode bridge for the alternator from a Zhiguli, a radiator from a Gazelle, an oil pump from a GAZ53. The transmission, gearbox, and axles are very reliable. Owners consider the front and rear suspensions to last forever. Considering that the Frontera was initially inexpensive, and now even the most expensive versions of this respectable frame SUV in the all-round class cost less than the most budget-friendly cars, purchasing such a car can be a very sensible move for someone with a knack for handymen, who knows which side of a screwdriver is on and how to hold a wrench, but doesn't want to spend extra money on a utilitarian vehicle for trips to the country or fishing. The car, of course, has certain weak points and weaknesses, which we'll discuss later, as well as design flaws, such as the automatic front-wheel freewheel clutches on the older generation Frontera. It's no coincidence that many owners of these vehicles, especially those who regularly drive their vehicles off-road, believe it's worth replacing the standard clutches with mechanical ones from a VM or Super Winch at the first opportunity. Yes, in this case, when leaving the pavement, you'll have to stop, get out of the cab, and manually engage the clutches, and then reverse the procedure when returning to the pavement. But this gives you confidence that the engaged front axle will actually perform its intended function in difficult situations. Another drawback, common to all ISU SUVs, is the unfortunate low-mounted alternator, which suffers greatly when the vehicle is submerged in mud. Those who repair their vehicles themselves will be greatly disappointed by the fact that replacing the fuel pump, cleaning its filter, or checking the fuel level sensor requires removing the fuel tank. The owner's manual states that a special access hatch is provided for these operations. In reality, it's simply missing, and the age of the vehicle inevitably affects the frequency of breakdowns. But many reviews echo a simple idea. Even if the Frontera breaks down, it still gets its owner to its destination, no matter how bad things get. Reviews of the Opel Frontera's trunk are completely mixed. On the one hand, The car inherited a huge cargo compartment from its pickup truck ancestor. You can carry a packed wardrobe, doors, and cement for a Dacia under construction, or seat 4 passengers, and the trunk will easily accommodate all their suitcases. Hunters will be delighted that a hunted boar flies into the trunk with a bang. Fishing enthusiasts will be delighted that an inflatable boat with a motor and all the gear will fit in there without a problem. But the problem is that the car, at least its older versions, also inherited a horizontally split tailgate from the pickup truck. On the one hand, this simplifies transporting long items, but on the other, even a man nicknamed Dolgoruki would be out of reach of the items stored in the front of the trunk. Owners of the short wheelbase Frontera Sport unanimously complain that the trunk is too small. Furthermore, the rear of the short wheelbase version is a removable plastic cover. On many cars, it constantly creaks and makes its presence known. The good news is that it can be removed in exactly 7 minutes. Even if you're alone, though, the person doing it has to be nicknamed Dolgoruki. Then you can load up the car with a cheerful group and head out in the heat to some lake or river for a swim. The pre-1995 rear door design presented another problem. The spare tire is mounted on a special bracket, colloquially known as a gate. In fact, the horizontally split tailgate left the designers with no other options. The hinges of this bracket rest on bearings, which often fall apart under vibration. These bearings are not available as spare parts, so you have to simply find suitable ones. It would be strange to expect a car originally designed not even in the early 1990s, but in the late 1980s. That's when the Yiwu Wizard, later known as the RO, entered the Japanese market, which in turn served as the basis for the Frontera. And developed on the basis of a light truck, the interior will be modern, cozy, and exceptionally comfortable. Indeed, the trim, design, and architecture of the Frontera's dashboard are described in most reviews as simple, Spartan, and rather sparse. Naturally, there are no soft plastics, only hard, soft-look materials. The Frontera A, with its angular instrument cluster visor and heater and fan controls, seems downright fossilized. The Frontera B's design is somewhat more modern, but it still can't be called opulent. Naturally, there are no electronic bells and whistles, such as the now familiar touchscreen or slots for SD cards or USB flash drives with music. Perhaps one of the previous owners replaced the stock radio with something more modern. But while the interior isn't overflowing with bells and whistles, it has practically everything you need for a comfortable and safe ride. It includes full power accessories, air conditioning, a sunroof, and heated seats. Naturally, more modest trim levels are also available. The plastic doesn't squeak or rattle, and the cabin is quiet. Numerous reviews note the surprisingly decent sound insulation. The seat upholstery is available in either leather or fabric, which is a bit rough, but high quality and durable. Fabric upholstery gets dirty fairly quickly, but it's also easy to clean. And, most importantly, it was equipped with excellent, German-style comfortable seats, similar to those from the renowned Recaro brand. Firm, with well-developed lateral support. In any case, today's Frontera is being bought as a workhorse, not for urban living, but for driving on poor or even completely poor roads. And for such a status, this car can be considered very comfortable. However, the ALACAR seats are for the driver and front passenger. Those in the rear are somewhat less fortunate. On the one hand, there's not exactly a lack of space. At least 3 adults in the back seat aren't cramped. It's perfect for fishing or hunting. As one online reviewer noted, due to the position of the airbag, after about 5 hours of long-distance driving, second-row occupants begin to complain of numb legs. Furthermore, if the driver doesn't notice a speed bump, passengers' heads inevitably face a painful encounter with the ceiling and sunroof. The ceiling in the Frontera's cabin is quite low, and the suspension, as befits a frame SUV, combines rigidity and energy absorption. But the main complaint was the difficulty getting into the second row of seats. the doors themselves are narrow and don't open wide enough. This is a common complaint. While the Frontera's reliability is debatable, with ratings ranging from "it was the worst and most fragile car I've ever owned" to "I've owned a Frontera for 11 years, and it's now 17 years old. So, I've done almost nothing on it." So, there's one issue that even the most ardent Frontera haters agree on. Both those who rate the car positively and those who lambast it agree that the model boasts exceptional corrosion resistance, both in terms of body and frame. You can find numerous reviews of used Opel Frontera purchases. They all sound pretty much the same. The budget was several $100,000 rubles. A body-on-frame SUV was needed. The Frontera wasn't even considered initially, but as I examined alternatives, mostly Nissan and Mitsubishi models, it became clear that they were all complete and utter junk. Out of desperation, someone goes to look at an Opel Frontera, not expecting anything good. After all, everyone knows that at the end of its life, every car turns into an Opel. And then, to their surprise, they discover that this meme has nothing to do with the Frontera model. Or perhaps the Frontera is a very atypical Opel. Indeed, there's something surprising about it. The frame of this 25-year-old car is free of any traces of corrosion, completely rust-free, and has factory paint. And if you're willing to overcome the ailments of age and design flaws on your own, you'll be honest even after a few years of use. After 3 winters, not a single spot of corrosion appeared on the body after 4 years of use, and no rust appeared anywhere. The body and frame haven't caused me any problems. Experienced owners might recommend covering up the number stamped in by a hole with grease, as this is precisely the area that can rust to the point of being illegible, making it difficult to sell and register. But what you definitely won't read a good word about is the Opel Frontera's electrical system. No one calls it anything other than unreliable, weak, and cheesy. The primary weak point is the instrument panel. The tachometer stops working, then the speedometer, then the check light comes on, then goes out. The panel is fairly easy to remove, 6 nuts and 5 screws. But, alas, even a thorough cleaning of the contacts may not yield any positive results, or it may, and this is unpredictable. The airbag error message often comes on, and sometimes wiggling the wires under the driver's and front passenger seats is enough to clear it. There are many complaints about the power windows failing, and the engine control electronics aren't particularly reliable either. The position, camshaft, crankshaft, and detonation sensors all fail. All the sensors, modules, and electronics are identical to those from Bosch, but they cost 2 to 3 times as much in stores. The control unit is housed in a sort of aluminum box, lacking even the slightest hint of waterproofing. As a result, all the water dust, collecting on the huge wiring harness, simply drains into this repository of electronic brains. And as a result, according to owners of some unsuccessful examples, a week without electronic glitches can be celebrated as a holiday. Fuel efficiency, so beloved by European buyers, was built into the Opel Frontera's design from the very beginning. Naturally, diesel engines have the best fuel economy figures. For example, the 2.3-liter, 100-horsepower engine consumes between 7.8 and 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers in combined driving. I haven't come across any reviews of the 8-valve engine's fuel consumption. However, owners note that the engine is indeed very fuel efficient at speeds of 95 to 100 kilometers per hour, but as speed increases, it begins to consume fuel like crazy. Owners consider its contemporary to be quite economical. 9 liters per 100 kilometers on the highway and 13 in the city are quite good for a 2-ton veteran. However, the 2.2-liter Ecotec engine with 136 horsepower has received the most praise. On the highway, it almost always manages to stay under 10 liters per 100 kilometers, and in the city, its consumption does not exceed 12 liters per 100 kilometers. As for the 3.2-liter, with 205 horsepower, it is praised by almost everyone who has had to deal with it. This engine not only provides the Frontera with acceptable dynamics but is also renowned for its reliability. It is very lightweight, has excellent thermal balance, and can idle for hours. Many reviewers switch to the Frontera from budget cars. It's clear that after these, the Frontera feels like a real tank. It climbs a 30-degree slope without a problem, naturally, in low gear, and descends in the same gear without using the brake pedal. It also handles mud. All this means that if the owner's off-road ambitions don't extend beyond mushroom hunting or fishing, the Opel Frontera is perfectly capable of satisfying their needs.